Does your kill-death ratio matter? It's a sensitive topic for some, so do try to hear me out, and before you comment, do try to watch the whole thing. I don't want people telling me off in the comments for making some assertion which I never did. So before you angrily call me a COD kid who just wants to pad his stats and like stat padding and whatnot, please listen to what I'm saying rather than just making stupid assumptions. The ever-present question on Battlefield message boards is, does my KD matter? Most of the comments that you will find in response to this, at least those comments which aren't immediately drowned in dissent, will tell you that KD doesn't matter whatsoever. It's all about the holy objective of, well, the objective, that it's holy itself. It's the objective, playing the objective. But when it actually comes to playing the objective, it turns out that kills do, in many cases, they're very important. But the issue isn't nearly so simple as to enable me to say, yes, KD matters, or no, KD does not matter. Any categorical answer to the question is going to be wrong. One other thing, don't mistake playing for stats with actual good play. Does kill-death ratio matter on the stats page? Not really. But can it matter in regards to altering the outcome of some games? Definitely. Now here's one thing that everyone should keep in mind. Just as I do not disparage those who don't take the game particularly seriously, which is to say the casuals, I know some people think I don't like casuals, or I somehow think that no casual should play the game, but that's simply not the case. I just often find myself dividing the player base into casual and non-casual for the purposes of argument, because the two groups play and look at the game completely differently. So just as it is important to realize that casuals have just as much right to play the game as other more serious players do, you have to realize that people who just play for KD, that's all they do, have just as much right to play the game as you do. They have just as much right to play however they want to. It's a pub game. You cannot and you should not expect people to play a game which they paid for with their own money in a certain manner that you prescribe for them because you have a certain set of objectives which apply to you and probably to very few others. So if you play the game strictly to win, or if you play the game just to improve your stats page, or if you just play the game for fun and you really have no idea what you're doing, all of that is fine. I don't care. Nor should anyone else tell you that what you are doing is wrong, because you are free to play the game however the hell you want to. With that out of the way, I can get back to the question. Those that are telling you that kill-death ratio will never matter in regards to the outcome of the game, well, they're flat out wrong. KD does matter, but not always. As I said, it's not a simple black and white question, and anyone who gives you a strict answer, yes or no, you should probably disregard whatever they're saying because they're wrong. Another consideration is that we have to consider actual competitive matches completely differently than we would public games. What is necessary, and sometimes in pubs, isn't always necessary in organized matches, just as what is necessary in competitive isn't always useful in a public game. Furthermore, different formats, depending on which sort of competitive you're playing, require different strategies, so what applies to one won't necessarily apply to all. Since the majority of people who go around telling everyone that one's number of deaths is completely irrelevant to the outcome of a match, I'll focus on that first. A simple question to illustrate this. Do any good players have bad KD? Beyond attack helicopter pilots who are specifically playing for their gunners, the answer is no. Because, to put it very simply, playing well and meaningfully affecting a victory usually means getting a bunch of kills on the enemy team and dying infrequently. The simple fact of the matter is that dead bodies tend not to play the objective, be them friendly or otherwise. In other words, it is quite useful to stay alive so that you can play the objective, and keep the enemy team dead so that they cannot play the objective. Effective play, which usually involves a high KD, is often, by the same players who tell you that KD doesn't matter, is often mistaken for padding one's stats, or just caring about the kills, something COD run and gun. Now here's something else to consider. There are a ton of bad players who have very good KDs. In fact, the entirety of the top leaderboard for KD in Battlefield 1 consists of mostly terrible players who have very little impact, or in some cases even a distinctly negative impact, on the course of their game. Because they're specifically playing for KD, and because they specifically do not want to die at all, they are usually somewhat of a deadweight on the team, because almost always they hang back way far away from the action to minimize any risk to themselves, but at the same time preventing them from achieving any real reward for their own team. So virtually all great players have good KDs, but not all players with good KDs are good players. So how do we determine a good player? It usually comes down to score per minute and kills per minute. Just as important as kill ratio is the number of people you kill per minute. You can't halt a push onto a flag, and you can't meaningfully affect a flag's burn status if you're only picking off one every couple minutes. Killing a large number of enemies, mind you, enemies that are relevant, which is to say enemies that are actually pushing onto an objective or threatening to do so, killing a large number of relevant enemies in a short period of time is much more important than having an extremely high KD ratio. There is nothing wrong whatsoever with actively seeking out kills around flags. Really, I found that the best way to look at a player's skill was to combine score per minute, kills per minute, and KD. If he has a high score per minute, but a very low KD, he's probably just running into the objective and getting killed immediately, and that's not particularly useful. But if he also has a high KD and a very low score per minute and kill per minute, then he's probably even more useless, as it's unlikely that he's actually playing anywhere near the flags. And to some extent, if we want to keep looking at stats, accuracy generally reflects how good the player is at efficiently killing a single target. And of course, win-loss ratio, which unfortunately is not a particularly good representation of one's actual skill, as it can be heavily affected by clan stacking. So really, in a game like this, it's very difficult to get a numerical representation of the player's skill, which is probably why DICE still doesn't have an actually working skill-based auto-balancer. I'd like to revisit an earlier point, and that is that dead bodies don't play the objective. Simply rushing in as fast as you can to a flag burn or a bomb isn't always useful. I know people on Reddit would have you believe that it is useful, but in some cases, if you're not really doing anything effective once you get there, if you just die immediately, it can actually be detrimental due to ticket bleed. Positioning yourself in a manner that is technically outside the objective area can be extremely helpful to watch angles and remove the enemies that would otherwise prevent you from meaningfully doing anything on the objective. Letting your teammates arm the bomb or capture the point or revive your friendlies, it can actually be a good idea, because then it frees you up to do something like slaughter the horde of enemies coming to defuse the bomb. You can still play the objective without technically doing anything on the flag point or the bomb site. It's important to realize that preventing the other team from playing the objective is just as much part of playing the objective as being on the objective yourself. Now that said, you should note that not all kills are actually relevant. It's just as much who you're killing as how many people you are killing. Does a random recon in the middle of nowhere matter? Probably not. But the thing is, provided all your kills somehow affect whether or not a flag flips or a bomb is planted or defused, they matter. So that's when KD really matters. If we can say that all of your kills affected whether a flag went to your team or the enemy team, and you were killing a lot of people as well, then KD matters. That's where it's an important stat. That's where it's a good representation of your player skill. So, as I've said, you're not allowed to just go mindlessly rushing into the objective. So what's the optimum way to play? Well, the first thing to note is that you shouldn't worry about your stats at all. If you're worrying about your stats, you're probably doing it wrong. I can understand the appeal of trying to play a certain way so that your stats appear to look better, not necessarily for other people, but so that you have a sense of accomplishment. And that's, I think, not a particularly good way to approach things. Just play how you think is the best way to win the game, and well, if your KD happens to get better over time, good job. But I wouldn't actively try to improve any one of your stats, except maybe accuracy. It's always good to work on your accuracy. But anyway, the point is, as I said, to eliminate players on the other team so that you can play the objective in peace, you can peacefully camp your flag, and so that they can't. It's better to spend a whole lot more time getting in position and eliminating local opposition than it is to simply charge in without any thought whatsoever. But if I'm not good, does that mean I should not play the objective? And it's true, rushing pointlessly to die immediately onto an objective isn't useful whatsoever. But what's even less useful than that is making no effort whatsoever. Some effort is, in this case, always better than none whatsoever. So while it would be great if everyone could be the actively thinking objective player who plays conservatively when he needs to and offensively when he does not, well, sometimes we'll just have to settle, lacking any other better options for the people who just mindlessly rush into play. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'd rather have 31 mindless rushers on my team than 31 people who have no idea what an objective is. So it's okay, it's perfectly okay to stay alive and kill people when pushing onto a flag. Playing the objective does not always mean to mindlessly run from flag to flag to flag. You can directly play the objective without touching a flag or bomb or revive the whole game. Though that said, most people who don't touch a flag or bomb or revive all game probably aren't PTFOing. Ultimately, don't think that you have to constantly be in the burn radius to affect a flag's capture. And don't think that it's not beneficial to take some time clearing out the enemy before trying to capture the flag or arm the bomb. Now, I said I was going to mention a little bit on competitive, so here it is. In competitive, if you're worrying about your KD, you're a direct detriment to your team's performance, especially in Conquest, which unfortunately involves quite a lot of redeploying, which is why I think it's not such a good game mode. You're going to have to redeploy a lot to save a burning back cap. You're going to have to redeploy for your explosives and rocket ammo. You're going to have to redeploy if your squad mate thinks he's going to be in a good position. If you decide to play competitive Conquest, realize that it's, for the most part, a redeploy at the right time simulator. And that's almost entirely what makes a very good team, is how well they can move themselves from flags to flags in an efficient manner, which means usually redeploying. For better or for worse, winning strategies in competitive Conquest usually involve killing yourself quite a bit. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope maybe you could link it to the next person who says categorically that KD does matter or KD does not matter.